Hello there, and welcome back to book reviews for bookworms. This is a book I want to review called The Two Sandals, and it's Intention, Attention, and the Journey of Becoming Human by Etsko Schuitema. So, Etsko Schuitema, I've reviewed some of his books already, and this is pretty much a follow-up to this book called Intent. So I'll include that book review, but it's really kind of a follow-up to that. So I think if you're going to read one of these, you should probably read the other one. And let me read the blurb. Etsko Schuitema is a renowned business consultant and author of books including Leadership, Intent, and the Millennium Discourses. He's a senior partner in Schuitema, a transformative consultancy operating worldwide. Etsko is also a sheikh or teacher in the Shadali Darkawi Sufi tradition, where he is known as Sheikh Ibrahim. And he's also written a book called Millennium Discourses, which he wrote about 20 years ago, which was basically a collection of almost religious lectures or spiritual lectures. And me, along with another friend of mine, Sajjad Ayub, we actually produced a program which we put out on radio and on YouTube, and you can look that up. It's called Millennium Discourses, and something you can listen to in the car. We found it really, really useful. Back to this book, The Two Sandals. So really, like I said, this is a kind of follow-on from his book Intent, and it's about the maturation of the human being from being something that has to get and is only there to get to eventually being to the point where it has to give. And the blurb on the back is that we come into the world as scintillating points of awareness. Over time, we develop certain convictions about who we are, and each one of them describes a limitation. And I think really what he's describing is the identity or the ego. This book gives you tools to free yourself from that web of limitations by applying the metaphorical two sandals of intention and attention in order to rediscover that ecstatic, magical being who you were before you became defined, before you were made a person among people. The author takes you on a journey through the maturation process of the human being, seen through the lens of intent in the different epochs of our lives, from being an emptiness that seeks to be filled to eventually arriving at a place of unconditional giving, a fullness that seeks to be emptied. The book also contains practical exercises and techniques to help you clarify your intent and attention so that you may once again become that magical being that is beyond limitation and recapture the original ecstatic connectedness with all things that was experienced in infancy. So it's a big claim to make, to get you back to that original ecstatic sense of being where you have no meaning and identity. And getting to that is easier said than done. But what he does do in this book is, I think, give you techniques to at least start to break through and start to identify your identity, I guess, and your ego and what you've made things mean and all that kind of thing. And some people will be very aware of that. So he does talk a lot about meditative practices and gives you instructions about how you can go through with that. Meditation is not something I've got into yet, but I think reading this, I think it's obviously any kind of process, I suppose, could be a meditative process. And I think as we get older, I think we realize that what those meditative practices are that work for us. Some of them, some great bits in this, and there's one bit that I really like. He does this exercise called the T exercise, and he looks at things that events that have happened to you, and the best meaning you could give it and the worst meaning you can give it. And I think the point is to get to the point where you realize that you assign the meaning and how you do that. There's a great story here. A Sufi sheikh was once approached by a student who was complaining bitterly about his wife. "Oh, sheikh," the man exclaimed, "this woman I am married to is an awful person. Last week, my mother came to visit, and this good-for-nothing wife would not make her tea. The other day, she refused to cook my supper, but instead threw the food on the floor in a fit of rage. And just yesterday," the sheikh listened for a while and then snapped at the student, "Shut up! Why? Asked the student. Look, the sheikh replied, your relationship with your spouse is like the relationship between a vessel and the water it carries. It is the nature of water to find where the cracks in the vessel are. It is poor courtesy of the vessel to complain when the water finds the cracks. Yes, I can definitely testify that wives are good at finding the cracks. When people do things to us that we experience as annoying, our annoyance indicates more about our own conditional motive than it says about the inherent nature of the other person's behavior. And he talks about, nothing demonstrates this more profoundly than the extreme irritation we experience at the annoying habits of people from other cultures. And he talks about that and how we give meaning to that. So that was quite interesting. He talked about this thing called the T exercise, and he talks about the facts. So you write out the facts of what happened, the worst view and the best view. And then he applies that to the T exercise applied to guilt. Both guilt and resentment keep us trapped in an unresolved drama, which continues to reproduce the blood chemistry of ill feeling within ourselves. A lot of kind of spiritual things like that. There was one other thing that I thought was, I was just looking through that caught my eye again. Themes, maturation themes. So, he's, this idea of this immature and then mature as we go through life. So immature is needs, mature is values. Immature can't delay gratification. Mature, you delay gratification. Immature, impatient. Mature, patient. And then going through from being malicious to benevolent, untrustworthy to trustworthy, having rights to being aware of our duties. So that's great. The impatience of needing to have one's own way or the last word is quintessentially immature. It is about not being able to suspend one's own agenda or delay gratification. It is about having what I want now, having the last word. Okay. And again, I like this idea of, the immature qualities giving way to the mature qualities. Immature being competitive, mature being cooperative, going from destructive to constructive, conflict to harmony, does not listen to listening, and going from this process of needing to get to giving. So to get is expectation, selfishness, having your own needs, cowardice, and then giving is contribution, generosity, having values and courage. If we act in a so-called courageous way when a situation requires generosity, we are not giving, we are taking. That taking is called selfishness. And if we act in a so-called generous way when a situation requires courage, we are also not giving, we are taking. That taking is called cowardice. So anyway, there's a lot in this, and he does talk about the attentions, and the attention is about, the idea that the world does not, eventually get to the point where you don't think that the world does not surround me, I surround the world. I am not in the world is in me. The totality of the self, the totality of myself encapsulates the other. I am not the microcosm, I am the macrocosm. The eighth attention being the only attention that admits of no imbalance. It is perfectly poised between the binary opposites of form and meaning. In Sufism, this would be described as the goblet having become the wine, because there is no longer the pretense of existing as an object. There is no difference between what goes on in the inward and the manifested. They are the same. So I like this idea, and this is the Sufi idea that everything is actually connected. We are all connected. And even I think quantum physics probably would say, where do I start and where does the other thing begin? Even, my hand on the quantum level, on the molecular level, this should be mostly space. So what the heck is that all about? So anyway, I like this book. Again, it's if you're going to read this, I would probably buy this first. It's called Intent. And again, it's written in a very humanistic way. Anybody can read this. It's not based on any kind of religious ideas. This Millennium Discourses is a bit more on a religious idea, but like I said, if you listen to his Millennium Discourses YouTube lectures or interviews, I think he describes them again in a fairly humanistic way. But I like this. A few more practical exercises in it. That's, I think, him, Etsko, sitting in one of the deserts somewhere. And he's called it the Two Sandals because he's talking about the two sandals of intention and attention, which will eventually, one foot in front of the other, get you to a point of maturation. Hope you enjoyed that, and see you all soon.